Captain Sarah Chen had always found the ethereal guardians unsettling, though she could never quite articulate why. Standing 7 feet tall with their translucent blue skin and those eerily beautiful faces that seemed carved from starlight itself, they moved through human space stations with an otherworldly grace that made everyone step aside. Today, as she watched Guardian Velthara glide through the corridors of Station Prometheus, that familiar unease twisted in her stomach. The Guardians had arrived 50 years ago, descending from the void in ships that defied human understanding of physics. No weapons, no demands, no conquest. Instead, they had simply announced their intention to protect humanity from threats beyond human comprehension. Within months, mysterious attacks on outer colonies had ceased. Deep space exploration had become remarkably safer, and humanity had entered what historians now called the Golden Peace. But Sarah had spent her entire military career asking uncomfortable questions, and lately, those questions had been keeping her awake at night. Captain Chen. Velthara's voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, melodious and completely without accent despite speaking perfect English. The Council requests your presence. Sarah suppressed a shiver. The Guardian Council meetings always felt more like audiences with benevolent gods than military briefings. She followed Velthara through the station's upper levels, past viewports showing the star-scattered darkness where Guardian patrol ships moved in patterns too complex for human minds to follow. The Council chamber was a marvel of Guardian technology, its walls seeming to extend into infinity, while somehow remaining intimately small. 5 Guardians sat in a semicircle, their luminous eyes focused on Sarah with an intensity that made her feel like a specimen under a microscope. Captain, spoke Guardian Liranen, apparently their leader, though Sarah had never seen any indication of hierarchy among them. Your recent patrol reports indicate curiosity about our protective boundaries. Sarah kept her expression neutral. I've noticed some anomalies in deep space scans. Energy signatures that don't match any known phenomena. These signatures represent threats we shield you from, Liranen replied smoothly. Your species is not yet ready to comprehend their nature. There it was again. That phrase Sarah had heard countless times over the years. Not ready. Never an explanation of what they were being protected from. Never a timeline for when humanity might be ready. Never any concrete evidence of these supposed threats. With respect, Guardian Liranen, Sarah chose her words carefully. Humanity has faced extinction-level threats before. We survived ice ages, plagues, wars that consumed entire continents. We've proven remarkably adaptable. The 5 Guardians exchanged glances, a flicker of communication passing between them too quick for human eyes to follow. Captain Chen, Velthara interjected, her musical voice carrying a note of what almost sounded like warning. Some knowledge brings only suffering. We spare you this burden. Sarah felt her jaw clench. That's not your choice to make. The silence that followed stretched for several heartbeats. Sarah watched the Guardians' faces, noting details she had never paid attention to before. Their expressions never quite matched their words. Their eyes held depths that seemed ancient beyond measure, but also something else, something that looked almost like guilt. Your curiosity is noted, Captain, Liranen finally said. Continue your duties as assigned. It was clearly a dismissal, but Sarah didn't move. What happened to the Calarian Empire? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah had done her research, diving deep into pre-Guardian historical records. The Calarians had been humanity's first contact with intelligent alien life. A brief encounter at the edge of human space just months before the Guardians arrived. Then nothing. No further contact, no explanation, no trace of their existence except in buried files that most humans had forgotten. Velthara's luminescent skin flickered, the closest thing to a tell Sarah had ever seen from a Guardian. The Calarians were relocated to a more suitable environment, Liranen said carefully. Relocated by whom? By those who understood the greater picture. Sarah felt her heart racing. You mean relocated by you? Another exchange of glances between the Guardians. Sarah pressed on, sensing she had struck something important. How many other species have you relocated? How many civilizations have you deemed unsuitable for contact with humanity? Captain Chen, Liranen's voice carried a note of finality. These questions serve no constructive purpose. But Sarah was beyond caring about Guardian sensibilities. 50 years of unquestioned protection had bred complacency in humanity. But she was military. She had trained to ask the hard questions, to probe for weaknesses, to never accept easy answers. What if we don't want your protection anymore? The words escaped before Sarah could stop them. The council chamber fell into a silence so profound she could hear her own heartbeat. The 5 guardians stared at her with expressions that had shifted from benevolent authority to something harder to read. "Captain," Velthara said slowly, "humanity benefits greatly from our guardianship. Crime rates have plummeted. Wars have ended. Your species has achieved unprecedented prosperity." "At what cost?" Sarah demanded. "We've stopped exploring beyond your boundaries. We've grown soft, dependent. We've forgotten how to fight our own battles. Because you no longer need to fight them. Or because you won't let us see what we should be fighting against." Liranon rose from his seat, his towering form casting impossible shadows in the infinite chamber. "Captain Chen, you speak of things beyond your understanding. Return to your duties. Consider our conversation concluded." As Sarah turned to leave, her mind was already racing. The Guardians' reactions had told her more than their words. There were secrets here, layers of deception wrapped in benevolent intention. And for the first time in 50 years, someone in humanity was asking the right questions. Walking back through the corridors of Prometheus Station, Sarah watched ordinary humans go about their daily lives, safe and secure under Guardian protection. They looked content, prosperous, happy. But she couldn't shake the feeling that they also looked like cattle in a well-tended pasture. The question was, were they being protected, or were they being prepared for something else entirely? And more importantly, what would happen if humanity decided they wanted to find out what lay beyond the Guardians' protective embrace? Sarah knew she was about to find out. 3 weeks after her confrontation with the Guardian Council, Sarah Chen found herself in the deepest archives of Prometheus Station, surrounded by data files that officially didn't exist. Dr. Marcus Webb, the station's chief xenobiologist, sat across from her, his weathered face grim in the blue glow of the holographic displays. "I've been cataloging anomalies for 20 years, Webb whispered, though they were alone in the sealed archive chamber. "Every time I bring them to Guardian attention, they're explained away or classified beyond my clearance level." Sarah studied the data streaming past her eyes. Sensor readings from the edges of Guardian space showed consistent patterns of artificial energy signatures, but nothing that matched Guardian technology. More disturbing were the biological samples collected from space debris, organic matter that didn't match any known life forms, including Guardian physiology. "Marcus, look at this temporal analysis." Sarah pointed to a complex chart showing Guardian patrol patterns over the past decade. "They're not random protective sweeps. They're following specific routes, avoiding certain sectors entirely." Webb leaned forward, his eyes widening as he studied the data. "It's almost like they're hurting something, keeping whatever's out there contained to specific regions. Or keeping us contained," Sarah murmured. The thought had been growing in her mind since the council meeting. What if humanity wasn't being protected from external threats, but was itself the subject being controlled? The pattern was subtle but unmistakable once you looked for it. Every Guardian intervention had resulted in humanity becoming more centralized, more dependent, more isolated from the wider galaxy. A soft chime indicated an incoming message on Sarah's personal communicator. The sender was listed as anonymous, but the encryption protocols were military grade. "Captain Chen," the text read, "if you're serious about learning the truth, meet me at Observation Deck 7 in 1 hour. Come alone. A friend of humanity." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. In 50 years of Guardian protection, no one had ever claimed to be specifically a friend of humanity rather than a protector. The distinction seemed important. "Marcus, I need you to continue analyzing this data. Look for any patterns in Guardian behavior that suggest they might be responding to intelligence rather than random threats." Webb nodded grimly. "Sarah, be careful. If the Guardians have been lying to us for 50 years, there's no telling how far they'll go to maintain that lie." Observation Deck 7 was one of the station's newer additions, a transparent aluminum dome that provided a panoramic view of the surrounding space. Sarah arrived early, watching Guardian patrol ships move in their eternal patterns against the starfield. Up close, their ships were beautiful, organic curves that seemed to flow like living tissue through the void. She had always admired them, but now she found herself wondering what weapons they might carry beneath those elegant hulls. "Captain Chen." Sarah spun around to find a figure in the shadows at the deck's entrance. As he stepped into the light, she gasped. The being was humanoid, but clearly not human. tall and lean with silver skin that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. His features were sharp, almost crystalline, and his eyes held an intelligence that felt familiar despite his alien appearance. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her hand instinctively moving toward her sidearm. "My name is Kethvar, and I am what your guardians would call a terrorist," the alien said with what might have been humor. "I prefer to think of myself as a resistance fighter." "Resistance against what?" Kethvar moved to the observation window, his eyes tracking the Guardian patrol ships. "Against the greatest deception ever perpetrated in this galaxy." "Captain, what do you know about the cosmic hierarchy?" Sarah frowned. "I've never heard the term." "Of course not. The Guardians have been very careful to erase all evidence of it from human records." Kethvar turned to face her, his expression grave. For the past 3,000 years, the ethereal Guardians have been managing younger civilizations throughout this galaxy, guiding their development according to a master plan. Managing how? By making them dependent. By convincing them they need protection from threats that don't exist. By slowly, gradually altering their development until they become compliant, docile, and ultimately useful to the hierarchy's greater purpose. Sarah felt the deck seem to shift beneath her feet. "What purpose?" Kethvar gestured toward the stars. "The Guardians aren't protecting humanity, Captain. They're preparing you. In 50 years, they've eliminated your military instincts, reduced your population growth, centralized your government, and made you completely dependent on their technology." "Does that sound like protection to you?" "Preparing us for what?" "To serve as soldiers in a war that has been raging for millennia. A war against civilizations that refuse to submit to the hierarchy's control." Kethvar's expression hardened. "Civilizations like mine." Sarah stared at him, her mind racing. "The Calarians were one of the first species to resist. The Guardians told them the same lies they told you, that they needed protection, that they would be safe under Guardian care. When the Calarians refused, they were eliminated. Not relocated, Captain, eliminated." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. "How many species have they done this to?" "Hundreds. Some submitted and became part of the hierarchy's forces. Others resisted and were destroyed. A few, like my people, managed to escape to the outer regions where we continue to fight." Sarah looked out at the Guardian ships, seeing them now not as protectors, but as prison guards. "Why are you telling me this? Why risk exposing yourself?" Kethvar moved closer, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Because humanity is different. In all our monitoring of Guardian operations, we've never seen a species maintain as much individual initiative as yours. Most civilizations become completely passive within a generation of Guardian protection. But humans keep questioning, keep pushing boundaries, keep asking uncomfortable questions. Like I did in the council chamber." "Exactly. We believe humanity might be capable of something no other species has achieved, breaking free from Guardian control before the conditioning is complete." Sarah felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. "What would that mean?" "War, Captain. Open war against one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. The Guardians won't simply let humanity go. You know too much about their methods, and you're too valuable as a military resource. But we're not warriors anymore. They've made sure of that." Kethvar smiled, and for the first time his expression held genuine warmth. "Haven't they? Then tell me, Captain, why are you here? Why didn't you accept their explanations and return to your comfortable, safe existence?" Sarah met his gaze, understanding dawning. "Because we're still human." "Exactly. The Guardians have underestimated your species' fundamental nature. They've made you comfortable, but they haven't broken your spirit, and that may be their greatest mistake." Alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the observation deck in red, and Sarah could see Guardian ships altering their patrol patterns, converging on the station. Kethvar cursed in his own language. "They've detected me. Captain, I have to go, but remember, the truth is in your own databases if you know where to look. The Guardians keep records of everything, including their failures." As he moved toward the exit, Sarah called after him. "How do I contact your people?" "You don't. When humanity is ready to fight for its freedom, we'll find you." He paused at the doorway. "But be warned, once you start down this path, there's no going back. The Guardians will do anything to maintain their control, even if it means destroying the very people they claim to protect." As Kethvar vanished into the station's corridors, Sarah remained at the observation window. watching the Guardian ships circle like predators. For 50 years, humanity had lived in a golden cage, safe and secure and utterly controlled. The question now was whether they had the courage to break free, knowing that freedom might cost them everything they had gained under Guardian protection. Sarah looked out at the stars. So many worlds, so many possibilities, all hidden behind the Guardian's protective barrier. It was time to find out what humanity was really capable of when pushed to the edge. The search of Prometheus Station had been thorough but fruitless. Guardian Velthara stood in the station's command center, her luminous eyes scanning the reports from security teams. The intruder had vanished without a trace, but his presence had been unmistakably detected. The quantum signature of a Kethmori resistance fighter was impossible to hide completely. Captain Chen sat at her desk in the adjacent office, apparently reviewing routine patrol schedules. But Velthara could sense the changes in the human's bioelectric patterns, the subtle shifts that indicated elevated stress and heightened awareness. The captain had been compromised. Captain, Velthara entered the office with her characteristic fluid grace. The security breach appears to have been resolved. A minor sensor malfunction. Sarah looked up from her displays, her expression carefully neutral. Good to hear. Any idea what caused the false alarm? Cosmic radiation interference. Nothing to concern yourself with? Velthara studied the human's face, noting the micro-expressions that the Guardians had spent decades learning to read. Fear, determination, and something else. A spark of defiance that should have been conditioned out of the human population years ago. Captain, the Council has requested that you take a sabbatical, effective immediately. Sarah's hand stilled on her keyboard. A sabbatical? May I ask why? You've been under considerable stress lately. The Council believes some rest would benefit both you and the station's operations. It was politely phrased, but Sarah recognized an order when she heard one. More than that, she recognized what it really meant. The Guardians were moving to isolate her, to remove her from any position where she might ask more uncomfortable questions or influence other humans. How long? Sarah asked. Indefinitely. You'll be transferred to civilian quarters on Earth with full benefits, of course. A gilded cage on humanity's homeworld, where she could be monitored constantly and kept away from any sensitive information. Sarah felt anger rise in her chest but forced herself to remain calm. I understand. When do I leave? Transport has been arranged for tomorrow morning. After Velthara left, Sarah sat in her office for a long moment, staring at the star charts on her wall. Earth. She hadn't been back to humanity's homeworld in over a decade, and the thought of returning now felt like a defeat. But perhaps it was also an opportunity. That evening, Sarah made her way to Dr. Webb's laboratory in the station's research section. She found him hunched over a microscope examining samples that made her stomach turn, twisted organic matter that looked like it had been torn from living beings. Marcus, what is that? Webb looked up, his face haggard. Remember those deep space debris samples I've been collecting? I finally managed to sequence some of the genetic material. He gestured to the holographic display showing complex molecular structures. Sarah, this isn't from any known species, but it's definitely intelligent. The neural tissue complexity is off the charts. Sarah leaned closer, studying the data. Where did you find this? Sector 77 Alpha, right at the edge of Guardian patrol boundaries. Webb's voice dropped to a whisper. Sarah, I think these are remains from species that tried to contact us. Species that the Guardians intercepted. The implications made Sarah's blood run cold. How many civilizations had attempted first contact with humanity, only to be destroyed by their supposed protectors? How many potential allies had been eliminated to maintain humanity's isolation? Marcus, I need you to compile everything you've found. All the anomalies, all the biological samples, all the sensor data that doesn't match Guardian explanations. Why? What's happening? Sarah quickly told him about her impending transfer and her growing suspicions about Guardian motives. Webb's face grew pale as she spoke. They're moving to silence you, he said grimly, which means we're onto something they don't want exposed. Can you get this data to other research stations? Quietly, Webb nodded slowly. I have contacts at the outer colonies. Scientists who've been asking similar questions. Do it. And Marcus, if anyone comes asking about our conversations, you've never seen any of this data. The next morning, Sarah stood in the transport bay watching the sleek Guardian vessel that would carry her back to Earth. The ship was beautiful, like all Guardian technology, but now she could see it differently, not as a marvel of advanced engineering, but as a tool of control. Guardian Lyranon himself had come to see her off, a gesture that would have seemed like an honor just weeks ago. Captain Chen, his musical voice carried what might have been regret. We hope your time on Earth will provide the peace you need. I'm sure it will be very peaceful, Sarah replied carefully. The Council wishes you to know that your service has been appreciated. Humanity is fortunate to have protectors who understand their needs. Sarah met his luminous gaze directly. Tell me, Guardian Lyranon, when will humanity be ready to stand on its own? The question hung in the air between them. For a moment, Sarah thought she saw something flicker in the Guardian's eyes. Not anger or annoyance, but something that looked almost like sadness. Perhaps, Lyranon said slowly, that is not the question you should be asking. What question should I be asking? The question, Captain, is whether standing alone is truly in humanity's best interest. The transport journey to Earth took 3 days, during which Sarah found herself alone with her thoughts and a growing sense of unease. The Guardian pilot remained in the ship's forward compartment, never speaking except to announce course changes or meal times. Sarah used the time to review everything she knew about Guardian operations, looking for patterns she had missed before. What she found chilled her to the bone. Every Guardian intervention in human affairs had followed the same pattern. A crisis would emerge. The Guardians would solve it with minimal human involvement, and humanity would become slightly more dependent on Guardian protection. Wars had ended not through human diplomacy but Guardian mediation. Diseases had been cured not by human research but Guardian medicine. Even natural disasters had been mitigated by Guardian technology. It was brilliantly subtle. Each intervention made humanity safer and more prosperous, but also less capable of handling challenges independently. And through it all, the Guardian message remained constant. Humanity needed protection because the universe was dangerous, and humanity was not ready to face it alone. But what if that was a lie? What if humanity was more capable than the Guardians wanted them to believe? As Earth grew larger in the transport's viewports, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She was going home, but not as a defeated exile. She was going home to wake up humanity to the truth about their supposed protectors. The Guardian ship settled into Earth's orbital traffic patterns, and Sarah got her first glimpse of home in over a decade. The planet was beautiful. Clean oceans, green continents, gleaming cities that spoke of prosperity and peace. But now she could see it differently. Earth looked like the crown jewel in a very expensive collection. As the transport descended toward the landing platform in Geneva, Sarah thought about Kethvar's words. The Guardians had underestimated humanity's fundamental nature. They had made humans comfortable, but they hadn't broken their spirit. Now it was time to find out if that spirit was strong enough to choose freedom over security, even if it meant facing dangers that had been hidden for 50 years. The transport touched down with barely a whisper, and Sarah Chen stepped out onto the soil of Earth, ready to begin the most important mission of her life, waking up humanity before it was too late. Earth's global archives beneath Geneva were supposedly the most secure data repository in human space, containing the complete historical records of humanity's past and present. What most people didn't know was that significant portions of those archives had been classified beyond civilian access shortly after the Guardian arrival. Sarah Chen stood before the imposing entrance, her newly issued civilian credentials feeling inadequate for what she was about to attempt. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's chief archivist, was a woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and silver hair that spoke of decades spent in pursuit of knowledge. She had agreed to meet with Sarah based on her military record, but the conversation that followed was unlike anything either woman had expected. "You're asking me to help you access classified sections of humanity's own archives," Elena said carefully as they walked through corridors lined with quantum storage arrays. "That's not something I can do lightly." Sarah chose her words carefully. "Dr. Vasquez, in your decades of work here, have you ever wondered why certain periods of recent history are classified? Why records from the year before Guardian contact are sealed?" Elena stopped walking, her expression growing troubled. "Captain, there are protocols established by whom? When did humanity decide that its own history should be hidden from its own people?" They entered a small conference room, where Elena activated privacy screens that would block any surveillance. Her movements were those of someone who had considered these same questions many times before. "I've been chief archivist for 30 years, Elena said quietly. "I was here when the classification orders came down. They were unusual." "How so?" "They weren't issued by any human government authority I recognized. The command codes were Guardian authorized, but they carried human governmental seals that shouldn't have existed." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "You mean the Guardians were issuing orders under human authority?" "That's impossible to prove, but—" Elena moved to a terminal and began entering access codes. "There are some records I can show you. Historical documents that predate the classification orders. The holographic display filled with data streams, communications logs, sensor readings, diplomatic records from the final year before Guardian contact." Sarah studied the information, her military training helping her parse the tactical implications. "Elena, look at this." Sarah highlighted a series of communications between human colony worlds. "These are reports of first contact attempts with multiple alien species. Not just the Calarians, dozens of different civilizations trying to establish diplomatic relations with humanity." Elena leaned forward, her eyes widening. "I've never seen these records before, because they were classified immediately after Guardian arrival." Sarah pulled up additional files. "Look at the dates. These contacts were increasing exponentially. Humanity was about to become part of a larger galactic community. The implications hung heavy in the air between them." Sarah continued digging through the archives, finding more evidence of human potential that had been systematically suppressed, advanced research projects that had been abandoned, military development programs that had been discontinued, scientific expeditions to regions of space that were now off-limits. "Elena, what if the Guardians didn't save us from galactic dangers? What if they saved the galaxy from us?" Elena's face went pale. "What do you mean?" Sarah gestured to the data streaming past them. "Look at this progression. 50 years ago, humanity was expanding rapidly, making contact with new species, developing advanced technologies independently. We were becoming a major galactic power, and the Guardians stopped that. They redirected it, channeled human potential into controllable paths while eliminating our independence." Sarah pulled up more files, economic records showing how Guardian intervention had fundamentally altered human development. "We've become prosperous, but we've also become predictable. Safe." Elena stood and began pacing, her academic mind working through the implications. "If what you're suggesting is true, then every Guardian intervention has been designed to limit human potential rather than protect it." "Not limit, channel. They want us strong enough to be useful, but not independent enough to be threatening." A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Elena checked her terminal, her expression growing alarmed. "Sarah, I'm receiving an immediate audit notice from the Guardian Administrative Council. They want a complete review of my access logs for the past 24 hours. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. "They're monitoring the archives. It appears so. Which means they know what we've been looking at." Sarah moved quickly to the terminal. "Elena, can you copy this data?" "Not without triggering additional security protocols." "Do it anyway." Elena hesitated for only a moment before her fingers flew over the controls. "This will take 5 minutes. The audit team will be here in 10. As data streams flowed into portable storage devices, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She activated her personal communicator and sent a coded message to Dr. Webb, a simple phrase that would trigger the distribution of his research data to contacts throughout human space. "Elena, after I leave, you need to report this as unauthorized access by a former military officer with possible psychological issues. Make yourself look like a victim. What about you? I'm going to disappear before the audit team arrives. But first, I need one more favor." Sarah quickly outlined what she needed: access to civilian communication networks that could reach the outer colonies. Elena provided the access codes without hesitation. "Captain, if you're right about this, what happens next?" Sarah pocketed the data storage devices. "Either humanity wakes up and fights for its freedom, or the Guardians decide we've become too dangerous to keep alive." As alarms began sounding throughout the archive complex, Sarah made her way to an emergency exit while Elena began preparing her cover story. In the corridors outside, Sarah could hear the distinctive harmonic tones of Guardian voices. They weren't wasting time with human intermediaries. Sarah emerged into the streets of Geneva, feeling like a fugitive in humanity's own capital city, but she wasn't running aimlessly. The data she carried contained enough evidence to prove Guardian deception, if she could get it to the right people. More importantly, it contained something else, proof that humanity had been capable of far more than they had been allowed to achieve. Finding a secure communication terminal in a crowded commercial district, Sarah began uploading packages of data to contacts throughout human space. Scientists, military officers, government officials who might still have enough independence to act on what they learned. Each transmission was a gamble. The Guardians monitored human communications, but they couldn't intercept everything simultaneously. Some of the data would get through, and once it did, the truth would begin spreading. As she worked, Sarah thought about the pattern Elena had identified. The Guardians weren't just controlling humanity's present, they were controlling its past, ensuring that each new generation grew up believing they had always been weak, always been dependent, always needed protection. But the archives had revealed a different truth. Humanity had been strong once, independent and rapidly growing in power and influence. The species that had survived ice ages and world wars, that had reached for the stars despite every obstacle, was still there beneath 50 years of conditioning. The question was whether that strength could be awakened before the Guardians decided that humanity had outlived its usefulness. Freddie finished her transmissions and deleted all traces of her presence from the terminal. As she walked back into the crowded streets of Geneva, she noticed something that chilled her. Guardian observation posts that hadn't been there before. Monitoring stations that were clearly tracking human movement throughout the city. The golden cage was closing, but perhaps there was still time to break free. Sarah pulled up her collar and disappeared into the crowd, carrying with her the seeds of humanity's either salvation or destruction. The next phase of her mission would be far more dangerous, finding other humans who were ready to fight for their species' freedom, even if it meant facing enemies that had been hidden from them for 50 years. The underground meeting took place in the abandoned subway tunnels beneath New Detroit, 30 meters below the city's gleaming surface. Sarah Chen descended through maintenance access points, following coordinates she had received through an encrypted chain of contacts that had begun with Dr. Webb's research network. What she found in the tunnels challenged everything she thought she knew about humanity's acceptance of Guardian protection. 12 people sat in a circle around portable light generators, their faces illuminated by the harsh white glow. Sarah recognized some of them from the data she had reviewed. Former military officers, scientists, government officials who had asked too many questions and found themselves reassigned to increasingly marginal positions. Others were younger, civilians who had never known pre-Guardian Earth but somehow sensed that something was fundamentally wrong with their protected paradise. Captain Chen, the apparent leader, was a woman in her 50s with graying hair and intense eyes. I'm Dr. Yuki Tanaka, formerly of the Colonial Defense Initiative. Until 3 years ago, when I was transferred to agricultural research for asking why our defense systems had never been tested against actual threats. Sarah took a seat in the circle, noting the military bearing of several attendees despite their civilian clothes. How many people know about this group? Cells like this exist in every major population center on Earth and the colonies, replied a younger man with the precise movements of someone trained in special operations. We've been careful to keep them small and isolated, but our numbers are growing. Dr. Tanaka activated a portable holographic projector. Captain, show us what you found in the archives. For the next hour, Sarah presented the evidence she had compiled. Historical records showing humanity's rapid pre-Guardian expansion, biological samples suggesting systematic elimination of potential alien allies, and most damaging of all, communication intercepts proving that Guardian interventions had consistently prevented human independence rather than protecting human safety. The response was immediate and intense. Several attendees confirmed similar discoveries in their own fields. Dr. Tanaka revealed that colonial defense records showed patterns of Guardian interference with human military development, while a former communications officer named Robert King described systematic censorship of long-range sensor data. We've been collecting evidence for years, Dr. Tanaka explained, but we've never had the full picture until now. Captain, your archive data provides the missing connections. Sarah studied the faces around her, seeing anger but also determination. What's our next step? The question sparked immediate debate. Some advocated for public exposure, broadcasting the evidence throughout human space and forcing a confrontation with Guardian authority. Others argued for a more careful approach, building their network until they had enough support to challenge Guardian control effectively. Robert King raised the most troubling point. We need to consider the possibility that the Guardians have been telling the truth about external threats. What if there really are dangers out there that justify their protection? Even if that's true, Sarah replied, it doesn't justify deception. We should be partners in our own defense, not livestock being protected for someone else's purposes. But what if partnership isn't possible? Asked a young woman who introduced herself as Dr. Lisa Park. What if the threats are so severe that Guardian control is the only way to keep humanity alive? The question hung in the air, highlighting the core dilemma they faced. Even if the Guardians were deceiving humanity, their protection had brought unprecedented peace and prosperity. Was freedom worth risking everything they had gained? Sarah thought about her conversation with Kethvar, the resistance fighter who had claimed that humanity's spirit remained unbroken despite 50 years of conditioning. Looking around the tunnel at these individuals who had risked everything to seek the truth, she began to understand what he meant. Dr. Park, Sarah said carefully, that's exactly the kind of thinking the Guardians want us to have. They've made us so comfortable, so dependent that we can't imagine surviving without them. But our own history proves otherwise. She gestured to the holographic displays showing pre-Guardian human expansion. 50 years ago, humanity was thriving independently. We were making contact with multiple alien species, developing advanced technologies, expanding rapidly throughout this region of the galaxy. The Guardians didn't save us from destruction. They saved others from our potential. Dr. Tanaka nodded grimly. The question is whether we can reclaim that potential after 5 decades of managed decline. There's something else, Robert King interjected. Our long-range sensors have detected unusual activity in the sectors where Guardian patrols operate. Energy signatures that don't match Guardian technology, movement patterns that suggest conflict. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. What kind of conflict? Unknown. But whatever's happening out there, it's big. And it's been going on for years without any official acknowledgement. The implications were staggering. If conflict was already occurring beyond Guardian boundaries, then humanity was being kept ignorant of a war that might directly affect their survival. More than that, they were being kept helpless to participate in their own defense. Dr. Tanaka stood, her expression resolute. We need to make a decision. Do we continue gathering evidence and hoping for gradual change, or do we force the issue? What does forcing the issue look like? Sarah asked. Active resistance, testing Guardian responses to human independence, pushing boundaries to see how far they'll let us go before they drop the benevolent protector mask. The debate that followed was intense but brief. These were people who had already sacrificed career advancement and social status for the truth. They weren't interested in half measures. I propose we begin with information warfare, Sarah suggested. Coordinate simultaneous data releases throughout human space. Force the Guardians to respond publicly to evidence of their deception. And if they respond with force? Dr. Park asked. Sarah met her gaze steadily. Then we'll know where we really stand. And we'll respond accordingly. Robert King raised another crucial point. We'll need allies. Other species that might support human independence. The resistance fighter I met mentioned there are others fighting Guardian control, Sarah replied. But we need to prove we're serious before anyone will risk supporting us. Dr. Tanaka made the final decision. Coordinated information release in 72 hours. Every cell, every contact, every platform we can access. After that, there's no going back. As the meeting broke up and participants began leaving through different routes, Sarah felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. For the first time in 50 years, humanity was about to take active control of its own destiny. But as she made her way back to the surface through the dark tunnels, she couldn't shake the memory of Guardian Liranen's final words to her. Perhaps standing alone wasn't in humanity's best interest. The question was whether humanity would get a choice in the matter, or whether the Guardians would make that decision for them. In 72 hours, they would begin to find out. Above ground, the city of New Detroit sparkled under its protective Guardian energy fields. beautiful and safe and completely unaware that its fate was about to be decided by a small group of humans who had chosen truth over comfort. The revolution had begun, even if humanity didn't know it yet. The coordinated data release began at exactly 1200 hours Universal Time, simultaneously across 47 human worlds and 17 orbital stations. Sarah Chen watched from a secure location in the Australian outback as the first reports began appearing on civilian news networks. Leaked documents revealing Guardian deception, historical records showing humanity's suppressed potential, and most damning of all, evidence of systematic elimination of alien civilizations that had attempted contact with human space. The initial response was predictable. Shock, denial, and fierce debate raged across every communication channel. Government officials called for calm, while frantically trying to contact Guardian representatives. Scientific institutions demanded independent verification of the leaked data. Military commanders who had spent their careers working alongside Guardian forces struggled to process implications that challenged their fundamental worldview. But within 6 hours, something remarkable began happening. Reports started flooding in from the outer colonies, sensor readings that corroborated the leaked information, personal accounts from individuals who had witnessed Guardian actions that never made official records, and most significantly, confirmations from multiple sources that Guardian patrol ships had been observed engaging unidentified vessels in combat. Sarah monitored the communications from her hidden position, watching as the carefully constructed narrative of Guardian protection began to unravel. Dr. Tanaka's network had done their work well. The evidence was too comprehensive to dismiss, too well documented to ignore. Then the Guardian response began. At 1847 hours, every Guardian vessel in human space simultaneously changed course, converging on major population centers. Their movements were precise, coordinated, and unmistakably threatening. For the first time in 50 years, Guardian ships took positions that suggested military occupation rather than benevolent protection. Sarah's communicator crackled with an incoming message on the resistance. Frequency. Dr. Tanaka's voice was tense but controlled. Sarah, Guardian forces are surrounding Earth. Multiple ships are taking positions around every major colony. This isn't a defensive posture. Before Sarah could respond, every communication device in human space activated simultaneously, broadcasting a message from Guardian Liranan himself. His image appeared on screens throughout human civilization, tall, luminous, and no longer maintaining the facade of benevolent concern. Citizens of humanity, Liranan's melodious voice carried a note of finality that made Sarah's blood run cold. Recent events have forced us to accelerate our timeline. For 50 years we have guided your development, protected you from threats beyond your comprehension, and prepared you for your ultimate purpose. Sarah felt the world shifting around her as Liranan continued. The galaxy faces a threat that requires the combined efforts of all civilized species. An enemy has emerged from the dark spaces between stars. Beings of pure entropy who seek to unmake the ordered universe itself. Against such a foe, individual species cannot stand alone. The Guardian's image was replaced by holographic displays showing massive alien vessels unlike anything in human or Guardian design. The ships seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, their hulls covered in geometries that hurt to look at directly. The Devourers have already consumed 17 galaxies. Liranan's voice continued over the disturbing images. Only by uniting the younger species under experienced guidance can we hope to resist their advance. This is why the cosmic hierarchy was created. This is why your development has been carefully managed. Sarah stared at the displays, her mind racing. The threat appeared real, massive, and immediate. But even as she processed the implications, she noticed something that made her training as a military officer sound alarms in her head. Sarah, Dr. Tanaka's voice came through her communicator again. Are you seeing this? They're showing us an enemy, but the tactical data doesn't make sense. Sarah focused on the fleet movement shown in the holographic display. Dr. Tanaka was right. The Guardian forces were positioned defensively around human space, but their formation suggested they were protecting something from humanity, not protecting humanity from external threats. The time for deception is past, Liranan announced. Humanity will now take its place in the hierarchy as soldiers in the final war. Your courage, your adaptability, your remarkable capacity for violence. All of this has been preserved and enhanced under our guidance. You are ready." The transmission ended, leaving human space in stunned silence. Sarah felt sick as the full implications became clear. 50 years of Guardian protection hadn't been about keeping humanity safe. It had been about breeding them into the perfect warrior species. Her communicator activated again, but this time the voice was familiar from their brief encounter months ago. "Captain Chen." Kethavar's crystalline tones cut through the static. "Now you see the truth. The Guardians don't protect species from threats. They create threats to justify their control." Sarah found her voice. "The Devourers, are they real?" "They were real, Captain. 1,000 years ago they emerged from dark space exactly as the Guardians described. But they were defeated by a coalition of free species working together as equals, not servants." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Guardians are using a historical threat to justify current control. Exactly. The cosmic hierarchy was created after the Devourer War, supposedly to prevent such threats from emerging again. But it became something else entirely. A tool for the Guardians to control the development of younger species, ensuring they could never challenge Guardian authority. Sarah looked up at the sky where Guardian ships hung like glowing stars, no longer protectors but revealed as jailers. "What happens now?" "Now, Captain, we find out what humanity is truly capable of. The Guardians believe they've created the perfect warrior servants. They may have underestimated what they've actually created." Across human space, the response to Guardian revelation was swift and dramatic. Some colonies immediately declared their submission to hierarchy authority, their populations too conditioned to resist. But others, particularly the outer rim settlements where Guardian influence had been weakest, began organizing resistance movements. Sarah monitored the communications as reports flooded in. Former military officers were taking command of civilian populations. Scientists were analyzing Guardian technology for weaknesses. Most remarkably, ordinary citizens were displaying levels of courage and initiative that surprised even the resistance organizers. "Dr. Tanaka," Sarah spoke into her communicator. "What's the status on Earth?" "Guardian occupation forces have taken control of major cities, but rural populations are organizing. More importantly, we're receiving signals from other species, civilizations that have been fighting Guardian control for centuries. They're offering support." Sarah felt a surge of hope. Humanity wasn't alone in this fight. More than that, they were proving that 50 years of Guardian conditioning hadn't broken their fundamental spirit. As if summoned by her thoughts, ships began appearing at the edge of human space, alien vessels that didn't match Guardian design. The resistance was rallying, and humanity was about to discover what lay beyond the protective barrier that had defined their existence for 5 decades. Guardian Liranen had been right about one thing. Humanity was ready. But ready for what? That remained to be determined. As Sarah prepared to leave her hiding place and join the growing resistance, she thought about the question the Guardian had posed weeks ago, whether standing alone was truly in humanity's best interest. Perhaps not. But standing as equals in a coalition of free species, that might be exactly what humanity had been preparing for all along, even if they hadn't known it. The golden cage had been broken, and humanity was about to discover what they were truly capable of when they chose freedom over safety, even in the face of an entire galaxy arrayed against them. The war for human independence was about to begin.